the role that is played by voluntary organizations in Hull with the refugees, and what kind of support you provide for these organizations and community groups?
Yeah, they get lots of support. Hull for Refugees is actually one of my chosen charities for this year.
Right.
And my colleague, one of my colleagues, my ward colleagues, actually is part of the committee for the charity of All Out for Refugees. They do absolute tremendous work. I've met many of the refugees that have come to this city, and lots of their money is raised through doing jumble sales, through market stalls, car boat sales, and I've been to many of those. And one thing I noticed, those refugees don't just come to this city and expect to get everything for nothing. They're out at 6 in the morning on a weekend at the stalls selling to make money.
You find them like hard work.
So they're actually help they're part of our volunteers, our refugees in Hull, and I'm really pleased to say I've seen many of them on many of my visits to the stalls. We know each other by first name.
So people speaking about the welcoming house. What is the council role in supporting these organizations? What kind of support?
Well, enabling the Welcome House and All Out for Refugees to have premises, there's a huge amount of interagency work, partnership work. Being facilitated by the council. There's a huge amount of voluntary agencies in this city who are actually dedicated, Friends for English, people who are enabling people to learn the language and just sort of
to have them
integrate with the community. And there's a lot of people from Hull people who are volunteers with that, and there's a huge amount of asylum seekers and refugees who become part of that whole supportive to support each other. So.
Lord Mayor, how do you see the impact of refugees on the life in Kyrgyzstan upon Hull, as the Lord Mayor yourself?
In the local area itself, to be quite honest, Hull welcomes refugees with open arms. These people have gone through difficult times to flee countries for whatever reason and finally come to Britain. We welcome them in Hull with open arms. They bring diversity, they bring different culture, and we celebrate that in Kingston upon Hull. And I'm pleased to say most citizens of our great city welcome any culture.
So do you think that is a positive addition?
It is a positive, it is positive.
And in what way you think is positive, like the diversity, like that comes with the refugees?
Why do I think it's positive? Because obviously I try to put myself in a position of a refugee coming to a strange city, knowing probably no one in this city, and come in with practically nothing. If they get a warm welcome from our citizens, then that's going to make them feel a lot easier coming to our city, because they don't know where they don't know if they're going to stay in the city or if they're going to move to another town or city in England, they don't know.
Exactly.
So that first welcoming within the city, it's got to be positive to both refugees and the citizens of all.
So how do you see the refugees' impact on life in Hull? I mean, do you think they've added something? Do they have any sort of negative impact, if there is any? What are these like positives and negatives?
Well, I can only...
I know like there's nothing such as perfect, so there's always the good and bad, but it's about weighing them.
Well, from my perspective, from what I see it from a counsellor and from Hull Help Refugees. I see that the refugees bring diversity, they bring culture, they bring, let's face it, the food. But also, I've met so many refugees and so many people from other cultures that bring so much, and I think many of them have done, being professionals in their own countries, and I see them doing jobs that are not to demean that, but they've trained and qualified in their own countries, and yet they still get out there and they work. They're bringing wealth to this city in many ways, and I think it's sad that they can't pursue their own careers, but I admire the fact that they still get on, and I work with people on a voluntary basis like that, so I can absolutely assure you that this does happen, and that they're an asset to this city. Negatives, I don't think there's any more negatives with regard to refugees as there are negatives towards anybody. There'll always be some people everywhere that have a negative effect on anywhere they live.
Exactly,
but I wouldn't see that as anything that you could put down to people being either a refugee or asylum seeker or from another culture. I just couldn't even see it as...
there's always the good.
There's always, but as from my understanding and observations and people I know and I've made and now my friends and the families and the individuals I've met, absolutely an asset to this city.
So how do you see the impact of refugees coming to Hull and East Riding? Do you think that is a positive input for the refugees, and what are these positive inputs, if there are any?
I think most definitely it's a positive input for both the refugees and for the host communities, because it enables people to learn about different people's experiences, and generally local people want to help, they want to understand and want to know more. We can help with that, and the same with the refugee families that we work with. Our main goal is about people making their own decisions and planning their own lives and making this their new home, and that's the work that we do to support them. To
integrate them to a new life.
Absolutely, yeah.
What would you personally say to the refugees as Judd Khaled?
I would say, if my children or grandchildren were in another country due to war and conflict and they were on their own, I would want people to treat them in the same way as we in Hull, most of us, treat them. And I would say that, well, I don't know, that's saying it to the whole people.
That's what you love to yourself, really.
Yeah, I think that's what I would say. I would say welcome. We'll do our best. And as I say, the council are doing the best. Every opportunity they do. The council, whole city council is doing its best. Hull Help for Refugees, Welcome House, all the other organisations, Open Doors. I don't want to name them because it's hard because you're going to miss somebody out. But there is a huge amount of organisations and they're all doing the best. So I think I'd say welcome to them and thank you for what you're bringing. And I'm really sorry because I know people don't leave their homelands for no reason.
Of course.
So I don't.
No, that was really nice of you, Jill. Thank you very much for your input. It's really kind of you to give us this time and this opportunity.
Well, it's really, thank you very much, because most of us consider ourselves very lucky that we're not living in that terrible state of war, conflict, not knowing what's going to happen, worrying about our families, our children, you know. I always think my grandsons, if they were put into a position where they had to either kill people or flee, I would say, here you are, go.
Exactly.
And
choose the more humane option.
Go. And so those young men, well, they're not, I mean, the men, saying young, but there's so many young ones who are in, you know, the hotel, who come to Welcome House, to Hull Help for Refugees to get their clothes. You know, I look at them and think, that could be my grandson, that could be my son, and it's heartbreaking, to be honest. And I am not the only one, we all feel like that. My colleagues and friends in Hull Help for Refugees, and my colleagues and friends in the council. I know we all think that.
And that's the thing that, like, looking up, and I'm sure you're in this sort of brilliant, positive attitude, setting up the best example you can do, because you're like figure in the community, and role models, and people looking up at you.
Well, so, I think it's more about us being grateful. We've had more fun with the people who help us, who come and.
But again,
so the wonderful.
As a leader,
oh yes, as a leader, as a councillor, yeah.
Just a normal member of the community.
Yeah, as a councillor.
As a councillor, as a leader in the community, as someone who people look about what you do and what you behave like.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
Do that and so you're encouraging this. By just the way you live it, it's just what you're doing naturally as a person.
Well, you've got a duty, haven't you, to if you're in that position, I think you've got a duty to actually use that.
To contribute to that.
To contribute,
yes.
You know, absolutely. And they are, you know, we're lucky that we've met so many amazing people. You know, we wouldn't have met them. You know, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Jill, for your time. Is there anything else you want to add before we bring this to a close?
Well, I think thank you very much for you. I mean, I know we're very fortunate to have someone making this film who's an example of someone who has brought their skills and knowledge and everything to our country. You know, so there's an example here now. Jesus, one of her charities, which not only helps us practically, but it tells the city, the first citizen in this city is accepting refugees and saying, well, so that's, I wanted to say that as well.
Yes, you are cared for.
Yep, the first citizen of the city. About me?
Yes.
Well, I'm a whole Labour councillor for Newington and Gypsyville. My previous, before I became a councillor, my background was social work, children and families. I'm a parent and a grandparent, and as I say, I use that as a very much to influence my compass. Yeah.
So, as the team leader for the Refugee Council in Hull, Chris, what is something that you remember that from your experience or the team you're leading, something positive that you remember from dealing with refugees?
Gosh, there's too many.
I'm sure there are too many,
There
but,
are too many.
but what is something that makes you like proud, like I've done this, I helped to do that,
Yeah, I mean,
like I feel satisfied I helped with that thing.
yeah, Stefan, there are so many, so many. You know, from the children that arrive that learn, you know, they don't speak the language, we're strangers to them, to how the children do so well. As you know, Gateway programme closed last year and it merged with another resettlement programme. So we did a celebration, and through our community development work, which is a big area of the work that we promote, we were able to make contact with people that had come into Hull on the resettlement programme over the 14 years it was in place. And you know, the proudest moment for people was that their children had gone to university. There's just so
like
much.
seeing the progress like over the years, like when they integrate, move forward, be part of the community and start achieving things.
Yeah, and we help them set those foundations and they've grown from that. And so many people are still living in Hull, which is really, that's good. It's a good sign.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, for your time and for your talk.
Thank you.